It was an amazing race to that point. That's what makes it so sad, you know? It's like when they play the music on the Amazing Race and you know the person's about to be sent home, or the people are about to be sent home. In this case, I asked the woman, though, I said, you know, can you give me some hints about why this was the case? And she said, well, Denny, you know, you've got to admit your resume is pretty quirky.
Quirky.
And I said, quirky?
Quirky.
To myself, quirky. And I got to thinking about that, and at first it felt really bad. It felt really negative, I have to tell you, and I thought to myself, oh, you know, quirky's got to be a bad thing. And then I got kind of to own it a little bit, and I actually kind of liked it. And I thought back on my career, and I thought, I don't believe any one of the steps I've taken in my career was a mistake. I thought they were all spot on the money, what I should have been doing. And so, darn it, I'm glad I did what I did. But I got to think about it so a little bit, and I thought, well, you know, I'm going to wear quirky as a badge of honor.
Yes, were you mid-career, beginning, more seasoned?
I was quite seasoned at this point, yeah, so I was pretty senior. In fact, I believe at the time, I won't give this away too carefully because people will search my resume and figure out who it was, but I was, I had a very senior title. And so I thought this was a perfect logical next step, although I was, you know, tarred with this notion of quirky. So what I said to myself was, I would wear it as a badge of honor. I'm going to just say something about my career, because you did ask me to kind of, this is what I think the people in the executive search business were hoping to be able to present as my career. You know, starting a coordinator and moving up to president, which would have been a nice way to go. And this, I got to think about it. So if I had to word map my career, it looks more like this. Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. And you alluded to that. And so here's what I realized, that, you know, visually my career is a little wacky. But as I said, I decided nevertheless to wear it as a badge of honor. When I was at the award ceremony last Wednesday, I decided that because part of my role was to sum up the day, and as I said, there were a number of awards being presented that day, I thought, if I'm going to sum up the day on behalf of people, I want to share this notion of quirky. Because quirky, if you look in the dictionary, the Merriam-Webster, which is a classic, lovely, conservative kind of dictionary, says it simply means different from the ordinary. I love that. I thought, these people in this room, with philanthropists we're celebrating, these foundations, these small organizations that do heroic work, and there were 1,000 people at that luncheon, every one of them somehow tied to philanthropy and wanting to change the world. I thought, ordinary people just get up every day and do the same old thing. The people in this room, and the people I hope watching this webinar, are not ordinary at all. In fact, they're extraordinary. And I thought, you know what? They're the kind of people that I think we could also say are a little bit quirky. So I got to thinking about that. I looked it up. As I said, Merriam-Webster says different from the ordinary. But you know what's really funny is that the Urban Dictionary, which I adore, says that quirky is not normal, but cool.
But cool.
And I'm a boomer, and the notion of being cool really does resonate with me. I think this is very wonderful. This is cool. This is cool. So I got a bit of a laugh at the luncheon, because I think that a lot of us in the room recognize that sometimes quirky is seen as odd. But in fact, I think quirky is kind of like the way geeky's become. It's become cool. So we're all a little quirky in this business, because we spend a lot of time, instead of dealing with the status quo and accepting it, we keep asking why questions. Why is the world like it is? Why do we have injustice? Why do people live in poverty? Why are women abused? Why do people who are simply trying to get ahead suffer discrimination for ridiculous reasons? We ask why questions all the time. We get up every day and we keep going. We don't just say, oh, well, that's the way it is. But we're not satisfied with the status quo. So we ask why questions, and I think that's really cool. In Man and Superman, George Bernard Shaw, there's a line that I just adore, where he talks about the fact that reasonable people get up every day and they try to adapt themselves to the world. Unreasonable people get up every day and say, I want the world to adapt to me. And his point ends with, therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable. So I like hanging out with quirky, unreasonable people. And that's why this work has, for me, been such genius and love. I just adore the work in this field because we get to hang out with crazy, unreasonable, quirky people who just keep saying, the world isn't good enough yet, we got to make it better.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just such a joy. One of the things I did challenge people to do, and I hope we're going to talk about, I think we're going to talk about this today because I know the way your mind works, and I love the way your mind works,
quirky?
Which is to say, you're a tad quirky.
Yay.
No, you're 100% out there, quirky, which is why we get along. I looked into other professions too because I'm an educator, and one of the things that I think we need to know as a profession is we're very young on the scale. Medicine goes way back, law goes way back, etc. And we've been learning on the job mostly. We're now starting to create educational programs like the one I'm fortunate enough to be a part of at Humber. And one of the things that I challenged people in that room, because I didn't want them just to feel like they were quirky and perfect, was to say that the profession needs to look to other professions who also had some quirky things going on and quirky people. And they said to themselves, we got to fix what we do wrong. And one of the classics of what was done wrong is this fellow, George Washington, actually had a sore throat one day, and his doctors killed him trying to treat him because they believed in bloodletting as the way to deal with sore throats in those days, and they took a few too many pints out of George, and he died. And some quirky doctors said to themselves, this is not obviously good treatment because this guy's sore throat shouldn't have killed him. So
quirky can be taken too far.
No, I'm going to say quirky were the people that said this is wrong because that was the status quo. The status quo was sore throat, bleed him.
Okay.
Instead of saying, really? That's what we should be doing? So what I said to fundraisers that day was, what are our versions of that? Let me give you a couple more examples that are fun. There's the bloodletting of poor old George. So let's not just pick on medicine, let's pick on engineering. Engineers believed that the way to make a suspension bridge was to just knock it across a body of water like they did in Tacoma, Washington. And then this bridge fell down because they forgot the math about wind. And the wind caught the bridge one day and essentially turned it into spaghetti, and then it fell into the bay. Engineers who were quirky said, what happened there? Why did this happen? And they asked the why questions, and bam, there you go. They changed their mind. But this is my favorite, and I think we should pick on teachers a little bit because I am one. This young fellow was told, his parents were told that he was profoundly stupid and would never amount to anything. Let's see who that fellow became as he got older. Oh my goodness, Einstein.
I thought it was going to be you, actually.
Yeah, that's the kind of clothing I wore as a kid.
Or me, but
So anyway, the fun part of this is to simply say, what's our version of Einstein? Okay. What's our version of the Tacoma Narrow Bridge? What's our version of bloodletting? We can't be so full of ourselves because we do good work and we do exciting work that changes the world, to say that there are not times we should turn the lens on ourselves as a profession and say, what could we do better? So that was my challenge. My challenge was to say, folks, you're quirky and wonderful, and let's celebrate that, and let's be cool about being quirky. But there was some homework, and it was also to say, while you're celebrating quirky, and let's pull up the slide that says, let's have a celebration about quirky. It's not normal, but it's cool. But while you're doing that, and that's partly what we're talking about today, I think, is what can fundraisers do to make sure that we don't just go so full of ourselves that
I wanted to bring that up.
That we forget that we could be bleeding people who have sore throats, we could be building bridges that fall down, or we could be telling people that they're profoundly stupid when they're in fact geniuses. So
Or we could be celebrating fundraisers who, I'm sorry, I'm going to push back a little. There's this quirky with track record and integrity, and there's quirky where you are running from a position every 18 months.
That's right.
You're making unfortunate choices all along the way.
Absolutely.
The work can be defined and.
Oh yeah.
So
and
what is quirky not?
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to say
not?
that quirky is that, because to me that's simple laziness, or it's incompetence. We see bullying in the workplace, and people will say, well, that's just who I am. You got to get to like me because that's just the way I behave, but don't take it too seriously. Crap. That's not quirky. Quirky is creative. Quirky is questioning all the time, but in a thoughtful way, and always turning the questions first on yourself and saying, am I doing my best work? Am I a credit to my profession? Quirky is not, you got to just like me because this is the way I am, particularly if you're performing poorly, or you're, as I said, you're bullying others, or just expecting people to adapt to your way of doing things. That's not quirky.
Okay.
That's just plain old bad practice. And bad practice is not what we're celebrating with.
Great.
Quirky.
Again, we're here with Professor Denny Young, AFPGTA's Outstanding Fundraising Professional for 2014. I'm Rebecca Davies. This is a 101 Fundraising webinar, and I know we have a number of questions in, so if we can just pause here and ask one. Question number one, thank you very much. Is there a skill set you can't live without as a great fundraiser?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how to describe this in one word, so I'll be as quick as I can to say the ability to get along with people, the ability to understand that what we do in our work is enable others. We enable donors, we enable the community, we enable volunteers, we enable other staff, we enable the mission of the organization through our acquiring of funds and volunteer effort. If you find yourself thinking, I want to work in a role where I don't have to hang out with people and be involved with people and deal with their quirkiness and their differences and not celebrate that and find yourself wishing you could just be in a... Again,
there are fundraisers in our great city of Toronto that have the reputation of all of that being antisocial, lone wolves, lone eagles, but you can't argue he or she doesn't raise money.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say that is like saying there are teachers who get in front of a classroom every day and their class graduates and passes their exams, and that's all good things too. But if they're also telling parents that some of the students in the room are profoundly stupid when they're in fact geniuses, the question is, what do we have going on in our profession that we could do so much better if people were practicing some of the best traits of fundraising? And I have to say that the greatest people that I admire in our profession are the people who see their roles as including and enabling as many people as possible and not jumping in front of the spotlight every 2 minutes to take a bow themselves.
That doesn't sound like the traits of a characteristic leader.
Servant leader. Let's talk about servant leadership. I mean, servant leadership is what I believe fundraisers should celebrate as the best form of leadership. It's a way of saying, yes, I have a responsibility here. I'm not shirking my responsibility, but my job is to prepare a platform upon which really great work can take place, and step back and let that and animate that and enable that.
Okay.
And
perfect.
I think that's a great example of the definition. So look up servant leadership and practice it. How's that?
Thank you. Another question. What has been the highlight of Denny's career so far?
I talk about this one quite a bit, so forgive me if you've heard it before, but in the mid-'80s, the AIDS crisis broke out in Toronto. And I was working at the time in a national organization, United Church of Canada, doing really fun, interesting work across the country. But I felt really called to get involved with the AIDS movement, and I was hired as the AIDS Committee of Toronto's first volunteer coordinator. And that changed my life. And it changed my life because I saw people at their finest. This was a dreadful, dreadful time in Toronto. People would be diagnosed and die within weeks of diagnosis. It was dreadful. There were no treatments. There was no. There was panic everywhere. There was stigma. People were afraid of being in the same room as someone with AIDS. People were afraid to be tested because of the fear of what that would mean for their lives in terms of discrimination and stigma. And yet, every day, my phone would not stop ringing, and people were pouring through the door of that agency, which was a tiny little office above a Kentucky Fried Chicken store, to say, what can I do to help? And at the time, they weren't even sure whether they were putting themselves at personal risk or not, and yet they didn't care. They were saying, this is a crisis. I feel the need to do something about this. I'm horrified by people who aren't taking up this cause and doing something about it. I'm horrified that people are shunning people with AIDS. So that changed my life. It made me realize that for all of our problems as humanity, that when it comes down to difficult times and even the best of times, people will step up and help each other.
So how did it change your life? Are you very mission focused?
Yeah, well,
or was it a fundraising career step?
I think what it reminded me of is that we're only as good as the people around us, and that our job is to constantly recruit and look for these kinds of folks who really do deeply care, and and enable them to do their finest work. If I'd gone into that agency saying I can do everything myself, I would have been a fool. We had countless numbers of issues that needed help, and we needed to deploy volunteers all over the city to do all sorts of activities, and so if I had just sat back and said, well, I'm going to do everything myself and I want to be the star, that would have been foolish.
So I'm never going to get you to say my greatest career moment
was
that I closed a $5 million gift. I am being serious. What you are saying to us is that you're, in your belief system, a great leader in a career framework is to be a servant leader and to bring out the best in everybody.
Oh, well, if you want some metrics, I think one of my
not
finest
necessarily.
moments,
Yeah.
I think one of my finest moments, and I get to see this from time to time. When I was at the National Ballet of Canada, we produced several new ballets that we had to raise money for, and those are kind of in the arts, like your capital campaign, because you don't have a building to show for it, but you have this extraordinary piece of art. I was fortunate enough to work with James Kudelka, who was the artistic director of the day, and he created a number of wonderful ballets, including one that I raised the money for, which I, working with people, raised the money for, which was Cinderella. And
you're showing off right now.
I am showing off a little bit. I'm freaked out by that. But Cinderella, okay, so there it is, Cinderella.
Prokofiev?
Yes,
yeah.
A wonderful ballet. And if you get a chance to see James Kudelka's Cinderella, run, don't walk to the theater.
Will do. And I was, in all seriousness, trying to emphasize the point that it's not always about metrics. We've got a lot of questions here, so we'll get to them all. Thank you for that. And I also would like to pause and observe that it is World AIDS Day today.
It is.
Yeah. So
yes,
thank you
absolutely.
for your service to the AIDS community, all of us in Toronto, all of us. Next question, have you dealt with, I'm going to turn this from a yes-no question to how have you dealt with a bully in the workplace, Denny?
That's a toughie. And I absolutely, I have to say, my heart goes out to people who have to deal with bullies in any situation, whether it's kids in school. I was bullied in school, and I know what that feels like. And people who deal with bullies in the workplace, it's just a heinous, horrible thing to have to work with or work for, which is even worse, somebody who is a bully. So my heart goes out to whoever asked that question. I have to say, I hope nowadays, and this may be naive, but at least where I situate in Toronto, human resources people are becoming far more aware of the destruction of bullies in the workplace. I would encourage people to go to somebody who they feel safe speaking with in HR. If you're in a tiny little agency and that isn't possible, I honestly don't know what to say other than bullies don't change. I mean, here's the bad news for me. I think bullies have to be essentially legislated out of existence, or they have to be removed from the workplace. I can't give you the best negotiating tactics with a bully. They have to be dealt with from above. I don't think that's a great answer, but I don't think that you can negotiate with somebody who's a bully. I think you can negotiate with people who are inappropriate in that they lay on too much work, or they're unable to understand the extent of the work and have a tendency to become impatient with you. I wouldn't call that bullying. I would call that just people who don't understand necessarily what you do. And I've had difficult situations where I've had board members who don't particularly understand fully what fundraising is about and how it's done. And in that case, I think a fundraiser has to understand that a good piece of our role is educational, and we need to give people metrics and numbers that help them understand. You mentioned my program at Ivy. One of the reasons why I studied business is to understand how business people think, and I learned that when people have a misunderstanding about what it takes to fundraise, that it's really good to give them the numbers to help them understand.
Now you and I started
1 in 5 gifts might be the result of a major gift proposition.
Absolutely.
People don't know those numbers. They don't know that your direct mail campaign might do at best 1% in its first try. If they don't know those numbers, then they will become impatient and think you're incompetent.
We've got 3 questions to this effect, and you did mention that you and I started our careers as so many others, just on the street or with no formal programs around. You are a man with many letters after your name, and post-secondary degrees, certificates, and now you're a professor. The question, do you have to go to fundraising school to be a fundraiser?
I think you do now. I really do think you have to now. And I say that not because I'm flogging a fundraising program, but because I'm dedicated to this profession. And if you ask that question of a medical doctor, and here we are sitting in your workplace where you deal with medical people, and I would say that they would think, "Are you crazy? Of course you have to go to school." If we really want to be taken seriously as a profession, I agree that learning in the workplace is what we did. Is extremely important and formative, but we need to pass on metrics. As we just talked about, we need to have standards of behavior and principles of activity, and those are the types of things that are best taught in a school situation. And so I encourage people who are thinking of fundraising as a career, younger people, to look for fundraising programs and to get fundraising education in addition to training in the workplace. And I must say that those who have been only trained in the workplace, continuing education is available to you through conferences and all sorts of things. Don't sit back and say that the only thing you've ever done is learned in the workplace and that's good enough, because it's not.
Okay, we're going to have 2 more questions. But please, everyone, tweet them to hashtag 101webinar, log in, chat, or email me directly. We'd be happy to continue the conversation in our blog that's going to be published on Wednesday. So please do keep these questions coming. Second to last one, what's the best piece of advice you received when you started your career?
Oh boy, I started my career so long ago and I'm old and I have poor memory. Best piece of advice I ever got when I started my career? You know what? I'll tell you. I started my career actually in communications work, which is certainly the basis of fundraising. And I worked with this wonderful woman who had been an editor at the Globe and Mail for years. She was one of the first female editors of the Globe and Mail, and she was amazing. And one day I complained a little bit about something that I had written that she then hacked away at with her editing pen. And she looked at me very seriously. I'll try to do this into the camera. And she did it, and she turned her head toward me and she said, "Denny, Hemingway was edited. Get over yourself." And that was the best piece of advice I ever got. We can always do better. We can always improve. The people who are around you can help you do that. Take their advice. Okay, appreciate it. And last question, it's come up a few times, so I'm going to try to bundle it into one. And it kind of rounds out our webinar theme, which is career management and ladders versus squiggles. And I've been a squiggler. Well, so in our sector, is it a disadvantage if a fundraiser chooses one subsector, say environment or women's rights or international development? Does it ghettoize you? Does it pigeonhole you? Does it make you less marketable should you want to move to another organization? Absolutely not. I would never tell somebody who's dedicated to a particular cause or activity that they want to get out of it. And I want to emphasize activity as well. Cause is hugely important, but I also say to my students all the time, do what you love. People get into this field, I started as an event planner, and people get into this field and they're told after doing a particular thing for a while, like event management, oh, you should move up. Event management is low in the totem pole. Or you love doing research or data analysis, or you love doing data entry or donor relations, but you should move up. You should, aspire to be a VP. And I say, no, you should do what you love. So if you love doing digital communications, you love doing donor and relationship building or stewardship or event planning, do it. Don't get caught up in this, you should be moving up all the time. What if I really want to work, say, for the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, but a position isn't open for me at that time? Should I do what I love somewhere else, or should I seek to get into where I really want to work? I think you should become marketable to the organization, because even though there are generally more jobs in our field than there are qualified people to take them, which is an advantage. The organizations just don't willy-nilly hire anybody. They hire people that are qualified and that bring some value to their team. And so I think you need to consider what would make me a valuable member to that team. Okay. And that may be getting that experience elsewhere, rather than just going in and... I've seen this happen where people go in and they become disillusioned because they do work they don't love, and they don't do it very well because they're not particularly in love with it and they're not good at it, and they get to be seen as that member of the team that people wish would kind of go away. So they think they're working their way up, and then they keep applying for the job in the team they want, but because they've done mediocre work
and then they may come to not
they're already the person everybody just wishes would go away, and they're not going to promote them. And so then they were upset that somebody comes in from elsewhere, but that person was wise and said, what would make me the greatest major gifts person that TSO would want to hire? Maybe because I'm a great major gifts person elsewhere, and and they steal me.
Good, thank you. All right, you're here because you won an award, mostly, so accolades are coming. But before that, I do want to give you some words from an executive recruiter that I reached out to with a bit of your story, your quirky story, and who said what. And it wasn't her, but Tara George is very, very well known and respected in our country as VP and Executive Search Consultant for Ketchup Canada. And so I trust Tara. I reached out and said, Denny said this thing, and it wasn't her, by the way.
Yes,
we know that. Yeah. And I really respect you and your opinion. You've been doing this a long time. Squiggles versus ladder. You as an executive, very high level search consultant, what do you say about that? And this is what she said: squiggles are beautiful. And she had no time to think about it. I don't think of a career as a ladder. It's more like a web. And the trick is to find the common thread in your web, and that is your joy, and that will be your success. And you have to take risks, and you have to try new things sometimes. And so I really, really love that, and that is certainly my takeaway from what you've said, corroborated by an executive search consultant. And so thank you so much, Denny. There are so many of us that have so much to say to you and things to thank you for, and I'm but one of them. And I'm going to invite some people, and you may know, to do this honor for me. So we have here.
Oh my
Have a
goodness.
Seat, ladies, please.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
Have a seat.
The amazing Barbara Track, the amazing
I was
David
told this is going around you.
Oh.
Here, we'll make you look pretty.
Fun.
There you go. So for the rest of the world, thank you for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
We've got people here that have seen the maybe the early years and certainly the progression of
Denny had hair.
Denny's career. The eminent Barbara Track has been executive director at Wordsworth College at University of Toronto for, gosh, a dozen years, I think.
Almost 12 years.
Yeah. Someone I actually respect very much and lean on, so thank you. And we have Devin Katzoff.
Yes.
Yep. Humber Fundraising grad 2015. Yeah. So to round out the webinar, I would ask Barbara and then Devin to, maybe on behalf of each of your cohorts, let Denny know how we all feel as professional fundraisers for what he's contributed. Thank you.
Well, when I was walking to work this morning, where I do my best thinking,
Yes.
I wrote down words that I thought described you well. One was passionate, because you are passionate about what you do and for whom you do it. I'm getting verklempt.
I love that.
You are a dedicated individual, and you work, and you stole some of my lines before, because I think you work really, really well with colleagues and volunteers and students, and that's not a skill that everyone has. You're smart. And that is not something to be taken lightly, because not everybody is. And then one of the benefits of that is that because you are smart and you know how to communicate, you're a really good teacher. And probably the thing that I like most about you is your sense of humor, which helps you to be passionate, dedicated, smart, and a great teacher.
Thank you.
Well, speaking from the students that have to sit in your class, I'll make sure I say really nice things. I asked everyone in the class on Wednesday after Congress if they had anything they wanted to add to this little chat that I had. And what they really wanted me to pass along was their thanks for everything you do, and to let you know that everyone was in tears at the back of the room. We were cheering really loud, but watching you get that award, people were in tears, and we were so honored to be taught by someone like you. And I wanted to let you know that while we were at Congress, I heard many people actually say in sessions that things that make a great fundraiser are to be curious and adaptable. And in your class, you let us be curious, and you let us question you, and you let us ask all the questions we can, and then you tell us that sometimes we're wrong and sometimes we're right, but you give us the answers that we're asking for, and you really are teaching us to be adaptable. We're learning in so many different classes, and you're teaching us all the things and all the skills we could ever ask for, and at 8 o'clock in the morning with all the energy that one could hope for, and it's unbelievable. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yay! Thank you, Denny, for participating in our 101 Fundraising webinar today. And thank you to you all for watching and for commenting. Devin, Barbara, for coming in. Please, as I say, keep the conversation going. Email us, tweet us your questions about career management, and Denny, in our blog post on Wednesday, we'll have the answers. So thank you very much. Congratulations, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
And we're out.
We always say that and we never are. Are we sure? Oh,
You
you guys.
devils. Oh, thank you. This is hysterical.
It's actually Emily, so I have to take it back.
Yeah.
I like working with you. It's always a pleasure.
They were like,
Thank
put
you.
it on
All the
his
work.
neck for tomorrow.
I
No,
know.
we compliment.
You guys are awesome. Thank you
Oh,
so
you
much.
go.